Hello everybody, I'm Gwen Campbell-Mindes. Welcome to Gwen's Bookish Ramblings, and this is the last of the Dr. Dolittle books, Dr. Dolittle and the Secret Lake. This is an interesting end to the series in its way. So one of the interesting thing about the last book was obviously that it ended with the Doctor thinking that he wanted to figure out the secret to immortality. And so this book, it opens with the Doctor being obsessed with figuring out immortality because the thing is that what he's thinking is basically that people are constantly rushing around, they're flailing, they go through their lives in a grand fire of panic because we know we have a limited time alive, and that if you want to, get through all the things you want to get through, then you have to really, really rush. And so one of the things he had been thinking was if he could just figure out the, cure to eternal life, or at least incredible longevity, then people might slow down a little because they wouldn't feel the need to rush so much. And he goes through this whole first section of the book with him desperately working at this problem and working away at it. And in the meantime, at the same time, Tommy Stubbins, the assistant, is basically trying to cover all of those things that Dr. Dolittle used to do. Because the interesting thing is, now that Tommy Stubbins is since he's able to communicate with animals, it puts him in a position of being able to do many of the things Dr. Dolittle used to do, because, if you want to if an animal wants to have doctoring of some sort, they can explain themselves to Tommy Stubbins, who, the Doctor, having been teaching him as his assistant, has probably taught him a whole bunch of stuff about animal medicine, so that Tommy is now able to prescribe things that, in effect, the Doctor is able to no longer have to be involved except on really, really serious, major, issues that require his particular expertise. Tommy takes over running the Doctor's halfway home for crossbred dogs and, monitoring the existence of that rat and mouse club thing. That there's all of these things going on, and Tommy is sort of gradually getting snowed under while doing that. But eventually, the Doctor kind of gives up in despair. And one of the things that Polynesia and the other animals set out to do, I just loved this picture of Tutu the owl. He's fantastic. Look at that. I love these illustrations so much. It's vaguely terrifying, but owls can be like that. Anyways, so the various animals, or at least the ones who are known for being smart, they get this idea that what the Doctor really needs is a change of scenery. He needs to get out of the house. He needs to go on a voyage because he has a tendency to sort of sink into the doldrums, and they're, among other things, very, very concerned that he will fling himself into another project before he sort of gets himself out of the house and out into the world again. And so they propose the idea of digging out the Doctor's notebooks from when he went to Africa and met Mudface the giant turtle. I would like to mention now, before I forget, that I find it fascinating how many animals have totally normal English names and how many animals don't. I say this more because you have the sparrow Cheapside and his wife's name is Becky. And then you have the giant, the giant antediluvian turtle, that is a turtle who lived from before the flood, that is the biblical flood that Noah was involved in. This book posits a world in which Noah's flood was a genuine thing. We'll get back to that in a moment. Not too much. I'm going to be dancing around that topic just a little bit more because I like to avoid too many controversial things, and the discussion of the reality or not of the flood is one of those things that in theory could become controversial, so I'm just not going to talk about it. But anyways, the idea though is that this is a turtle who is probably at minimum 3,000 years old. I'm not entirely certain what the calculation on how long ago the flood was supposed to have been based on the calculations of when things were supposed to have happened relative to each other. But anyways, so they had gone to Africa, they'd met this turtle Mudface who had told them about the flood, and the doctor had sort of, in a madcap rush, taken down all the notes he possibly could at the time. And then they find out that Whitey the Mouse had offered up some of the notebooks to some of his fellow mice to use as nest liners, and so all of the doctor's notebooks about Mudface have been chewed up by mice and turned into nest liners. Well, after everyone finishes yelling at Whitey, which is completely understandable because I would be angry too if somebody went into my catalog of carefully taken scientific and historical notes and handed it over somebody to rip up and shred into bedding. But they managed to convince the doctor to go on an expedition. The interesting thing, of course, is that this is after a series of chapters that return to the usual strangely biography-like meanderings of a life. It is that old truism that a life does not make for great fiction because lives don't follow a path. We do not, in fact, have yes, you have a beginning and an end to a life, but you don't have a rising action and a climax and a falling action and a resolution. Life isn't actually like that. So it makes for very bad drama. I mean, fiction, if you're going to, take a whole life in that way. And these books very much follow that same course of, and then stuff happened. Because stuff happens in life. So we have that, but eventually the doctor is convinced to return to Africa. We return to the scene of the doctor's post office. And from there make our way over to Mudface the turtle. And Mudface the turtle tells them all about the flood. And just look at this picture for a moment, because I continue to love his illustrations, and not every illustration is gold standard, but I love how strange and evocative this is. The thing is that this is a mid-flood image, that the idea behind this is that Mudface, and that's his brother-in-law Wag with him, these two turtles. I believe the one that we can sort of see head on is Mudface, and the one that's sort of poking out of the bottom of the page, that's Wag. I don't recall his proper name, I'd have to look it up, but I believe his name was something like Edward, but Belinda, Mudface's wife Belinda, called him Wag. Anyways, so Noah's flood, the flood happens, and Mudface and his wife wind up rescuing two young people from the flood as well. That, Noah has his animals and various other things, but Mudface and his wife decide that they like this one young man and his girlfriend, and so they rescue them. But the problem is that with everything having been flooded, there's very little food available in the world, and so they wind up going to the bottom of the flood ocean that has, the flood waters that have covered everything. And so this is, in fact, a flooded area underneath the bottom of the ocean with this black, not sky, that's actually water. As Mudface and Wag have paused on the way to look at a milestone that is marking that this is some distance away from a city, and Mudface regrets that he doesn't actually know how to read milestones, he just knows what they are. But they go looking for food and manage to find sealed bottles of wine and, some things that were either sealed or managed to survive being that far underwater. This is just a lovely image that I liked of a bucket that is floating upwards from the well it would have been in normally, because everything is flooded and the bucket is made of wood and wood floats. And it's just a lovely little odd, incongruous image that this is all underwater. Which is one of the reasons for the extremely black background, because it's reflecting that this is actually at the bottom of a temporary flood ocean. This is an most excellent, fascinating looking image of Mudface having climbed on top of a dead tree to get a better view of stuff. I just like it. This is, I love all the different, drawing textures on the turtle and the way that he's drawn those lines onto the dead tree. It's a delightfully textured drawing. It's really just lovely. I love this. Anyways, so, and there's Mudface with the two young people that he rescued. Anyways, so they rescue them, and I assume that this is presumed to be the reason why there are Native Americans in America, because it turns out that Mudface and his wife carted these two young people from Africa all the way over to the Americas in a post-flood world, and so that's why there were people there. Or something to that effect. Anyways, this is just the turtles and the two humans making their way through a swamp, finding their way back to the seashore in just this dead area, this area just filled with dead trees. And again, it's a lovely, lovely, evocative image. These just wonderfully evocative images. Anyhow, so the last section of the book is just Mudface telling his story. Just all of this story about Mudface and his opinions of Noah, which are perhaps not the most sparklingly kind. And, and this post-flood world and the side effects and things that you would have seen in such a place. And it's a really, really interesting story. It ends with Mudface taking the Doctor and a few others on a tour because there was an earthquake at Mudface's lake, and that earthquake basically lifted up the dead city that Mudface in the earlier book, in Post Office, Mudface had said that, there was this sunken city. Well, the city, thanks to the earthquake, has been lifted up, and he takes them on a brief tour of the city. And Dr. Dolittle, upon seeing all the gold, Dab the Duck tells the Doctor, why don't you just take some of this treasure with us? We're always having money troubles. Just take a few things. We won't have any more money troubles. The Doctor decides to get up on his high horse of morality about how there's blood on this money, which is hilarious to me because everybody whose blood was on that money has been dead for 3,000 years. It's kind of a silly hill to die on as far as morals and ethics go, in my opinion. Anyway, so that's all I have to say, mostly because I have run down my timer, so I'll be on to something different and new when I see you all next week.